Mhm. Okay.
Okay.
And then it might be the new guy.
Will, are you talking to us or are you practicing?
Okay, here we go. Good evening, Amon. Good evening. I'm Wilmer George Griffin Jr., and I'm the co-founder with my wife Deborah of Shiya Ifa, a political action committee based in Muskegon, Michigan. Shiya Ifa, which means leave a legacy in Zulu and several other different languages, aim is to promote. It says I'm still muted. Good. Aim is to foster a positive narrative between both Black men and Black women from the community, sitting at the same table, debating, agreeing, disagreeing, and supporting each other while developing non-traditional outreaches. Outreaches that impact and address systemic issues that affect our community and our families. But we'll talk more about Shiya Ifa later. Right now, I'd like to welcome everyone to Brothers on the Block. The concept of a block has many meanings and images. Physically, when we think of a block, we think of a cube, a rectangle, or some type of wooden block. In sports, when we think about a track star coming off the blocks or a swimmer diving from the block. In football or basketball, a player blocks to halt or impede the progress or movement of an opponent or the ball. Medically, a block is an interruption of a normal physiological function. In construction, buildings are created one block at a time. In the digital world, a block is a contiguous set of bits or bytes that forms an identifiable unit of data. A block can also be a platform like an auction block. Yes, I'm going there. The auction block was where, starting in 1619, at least 12 million Black men, women, and children had their introduction to the new world as much in-demand chattel. In city planning, the block is a distance along both sides of the street, usually with homes or businesses. Neighborhood blocks are the main artery of any community. Welcome to the block. The block to Black men has some extremely important connections. It was on a pre-gentrified block where Marcus and Malcolm and many other black men and women stood telling us we were beautiful, to be proud, and to stand up, you great people, you can accomplish your will. The block was where young men used to stand on the corner, gathering to sing, harmonize, and do-wop their nights away. In many other communities, the old block does not look the same. Too often it's now abandoned and blighted, physically, spiritually, and economically. Sadly, sadly, far too many of our blocks have memorials of young people's deaths who died for nothing. But in some of our other older blocks, the block looks quite different. And it's not because of abandonment and blight. Some of our old blocks look different because of investors have selected these old blocks for investment by planting the fast generating seeds of gentrification, which can be good, even great. But far too often this formula displaces long-term residents and neighbors who possess little residence and sadly even less power. The block was also where far too many black boys and young men had their introduction to the American enterprise by making illegal transactions, an activity that destroyed far too many young men and girls' lives, along with many families and neighborhoods. Ironically, that same business model of the money-making runner on the corner has been ganked by big business and hipster entrepreneurs, which is making this their product of sales a fast wealth accumulating maker. Welcome to the block. But let's not forget that the block has been that place where black men have gone to share a drink, talk sports, argue politics, flirt, mourn, discuss, shake a leg, organize, and mobilize. So the term block can mean many things and create many images. So here we are in 2020 on this virtual block in the middle of community and chaos. I would like your permission to use my extremely limited theological imagination to go back over 2,000 years in history to a block in Jerusalem, where we see a poor Palestinian second generation carpenter activist who the Romans, the occupied power, mocked as the king of the Jews. In a sham trial, the young activist carpenter, accused insurgent, was sentenced to the equivalent of that day's lynching. As the Palestinian carpenter carried the heavy cross, his arrow of an electric chair up the long hill to his pending execution, it became apparent it was too heavy for the convicted accuser and convicted conspirator who was beginning to collapse from the enormous burden. Standing on the block right in front of where the convicted enemy of the state was fighting not to collapse was a big, strong black man from Cyrene named Simon. According to the three synoptic gospels and my understanding of black manology, Simon had just gotten in town from the country and was trying to see what was happening in the city on the Friday. When the Romans, the occupied force, saw Simon, a big, strong, dark man, they ordered him to carry the cross for the convicted rebel rouser. With the carrying of the cross, it is said by many that Simon carried the burden of the world on his strong shoulders up the hill to what we know as Calvary, in order that Jesus could fulfill his call. Some folks say that black men in America are carrying the burden of this great country on our strong shoulders every day. In some ways, I'm one of those folks. So here we are, Sunday, August 9th, 2020, and we have 9 modern day Simons from different regions in the country, different occupations, and different ages with different ideas and thoughts. But they all have come to the block to share it with you. So let us welcome our first brother to the block. The first brother that I would like to welcome to the block is Pastor Franklin. Pastor Franklin, welcome to the block.
Hey, good evening, everyone. And thank you, Brother Will, for inviting me to speak this evening. My name is Cord Franklin Sr. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and I now reside in Dallas, Georgia. I retired from the Atlanta Police Department in 2009 after serving 28 years. I'm married to Dr. Yolanda Franklin. I'm the father of 3 and the grandfather. I'm also a product of Clark College, New Orleans Baptist Seminary, and Carver Bible College here in Atlanta. I pastor the historic Mount Olivet Missionary Baptist Church, the oldest Black church in Paulding County. I'm a regional vice moderator of the Friendship Missionary Baptist Association. I serve as the religious chair for the West Metro branch of the NAACP, and I'm a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. I'm passionate about Black people being healthy spiritually, physically, and mentally. And I'm pro-Black, but that does not mean I'm anti anyone else. One of the many burdens that Black men have to carry is the weight of the negative images placed on our back by mainstream America. Black men have been continued to be portrayed as lazy, criminals, uneducated, irresponsible, violent, drug dealers, and drug abusers, and many other negative characteristics. As Simon of Cyrene helped Jesus carry his burden, the cross, it is incumbent upon us as Black men to help other Black men carry their burdens. As we continue to witness an unprecedented, not impressive attack against Black men socially, economically, mentally, physically, and spiritually, it becomes a necessity, not an option, that Black men help each other carry their burdens. As Simon carried the cross of Jesus and was compelled by a Roman soldier, I believe we have all been divinely called out as Black men to help one another. As we have this burden of Black men, whether you are 18 or 81, it's our job to help erase the negative images of Black men globally and replace them with positive images of loving, intelligent, productive, creative, innovative, vision driven, hardworking, responsible men who take care of their families, contribute to their communities, and are involved in their country. Black men on this panel are not the exception, they are the rule. But unfortunately, the America that we live in does not want us to see the rule nor know the rule. And so I just want to kick off this forum by talking or initiating a positive debate about a subject that has left a bitter taste in our mouths and bad images in our mind. I want to talk about law enforcement and the Black community. When I was growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, back in the early 70s, there was a show that came on TV called The Rookies. Some of you who are my age might remember that. One of the characters in that show was a young brother by the name of George Stanford Brown. And I could always see myself playing that image that George Stanford Brown played as a police officer, but just a little bit more swag. As I grew up and came to Georgia, I graduated from the police academy in 1984. I was assigned to the southeast part of Atlanta. Now, granted, I had heard about the violence and about the criminal activities in southeast Atlanta. So when I went on that patrol, my mindset was already I was going to encounter people who were violent and criminals. But what I actually found out is that the men that lived in this part of Atlanta were not violent, were not criminals, but they were hard-working Black men who were fathers that took care of their families. The women that I encountered were not women of the night. They were not prostitutes or strippers, but they were loving mothers who held down a 9 to 5 and cared for their children. So all the things I was taught about the Black community were dispelled for what I found out for myself. And as I continued to patrol this area and got to know the people in these communities, and they got to know me, we built an alliance that between the law enforcement and the Black community that helped make their communities a safe place to live and to thrive. Now, don't get it wrong. It was not a perfect alliance, but it was one that was built on positivity. And as it grew, so did our relationship. Now, crime in the Black community was low, not because I was patrolling the area, but because the residents in those communities took pride in where they lived and did not allow crime to fester. And where there was crime, it was not because the people were lazy, but it was because of a lack of resources in those communities. One thing that statistics show that is not the communities that have the most police officers that have the lowest rate of crime. It's those communities that have the most resources that have the lowest rate of crime. So one of the burdens that we have as Black men, we have to make sure that we bring in resources into our community to lessen the burden upon the youth. Because one thing I found out that if people don't have something positive to do, they will find something negative to do. And that's when they have these negative encounters with law enforcement. A 2020 survey was taken by Pew Research that says more Black people have negative impressions of law enforcement than white people do. And I can understand why, with all of the interactions of law enforcement between Black people and the communities today. When we see images like Charles Floyd on the ground with a police officer's knee on his neck, when Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky could be killed in her own home, when you have a mother in rural Colorado with her three children and their niece face down on the ground on the hot pavement because of a clerical error on the computer, it infuriates all of us and it should be a call to action. But one thing I want us to understand, we cannot paint all law enforcement with the same paint of disdain. We cannot feed from the same table of negativity that America wants us to have. Otherwise, we'll be just as guilty as they are. Instead of building walls between the Black community and law enforcement, I'm challenging all of us to be bridge builders and not wall builders. We have to find a way to build a bridge between the Black community and law enforcement so that we are able, amen, to have a good integration of law enforcement and our community. We must continue to advocate for change within the law enforcement community without becoming anti-police. The late great John Lewis realized he could march, he could protest, he could yell, and he could scream. But the most effective way to change the system was from within. So he ran for Congress and was elected to Congress. And once in Congress, he began to chip away at the systemic problems of this country. I believe we as Black men have that same burden to change the problem from within. We need more Black police officers and Black police chiefs. We need more Black sheriffs and Black deputies. We need more Black district attorneys and judges to help change the system from within. And when we have more educated, compassionate, and dedicated Black people in law enforcement who are influenced by their spirituality, then and only then will we see a breakdown in its racially systemic problems between law enforcement and the Black community. See, I encourage you and I challenge you to be a bridge builder of the community between Black people and police officers. Take the initiative to have community forums between your communities and law enforcement and have a positive outcome. Host a Zoom party or a Zoom meeting between police officers and your friends. Teach our youth how to react during police encounters so that they leave with their lives. Find positive ways to create interaction between Black and brown communities and law enforcement that patrol them. See, for many in the crowd, it looked like it was the burden of Simon to carry the cross of Christ. But I believe what they saw as a burden was really a blessing to Simon. And what we see today as a burden to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the Black community will be a blessing to our children's children in the future. Because only when we are able to bridge that gap can we all live in a society where Black and brown people don't have to grip the steering wheel when they drive down the street, but they feel comfortable at going throughout the community because there is a relationship with Black and brown communities and law enforcement. So this is our burden, brothers and sisters, and I challenge you to help ease the burden that's with us right now between law enforcement and the Black community.
Thank you, Pastor Franklin.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much. We now like to bring Brother Montel Pierre to the block, please. Brother Pierre. Pierre, you got to start over and unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay,
How you
fine.
doing? Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. First, I want to say it's an honor to be here with such a group of men. Not every day you get the opportunity to be with such a group, so thanks, and I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Montel Pierre. I would like to be the first to say that I'm a stereotype. Uh, the stereotype meaning I grew up without a father. My mother was a crack addict. I grew up in a horrible neighborhood. I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana. I experienced the crack epidemic in the late 80s, early 90s. My family moved from New Orleans to Muskegon, Michigan, where kind of the same, but this moved much slower, but yet it caught up. I'm now in Muskegon, Michigan, where we're one of the smallest cities in Michigan, but we have a high crime volume. But I would like to say the reason why I am in the community and why I do the community work is because it came through an opportunity. A wise man told me the difference between myself and someone that's more privileged is that I may not have all of the opportunities. So he gave me opportunity. And with that opportunity, I'm 10 to 12 years later still fighting this fight. Like, so how I think we fix this issue in our community, we have to understand why we where we at. We have to understand that we have to take more of a candid approach with how we fix this. We need to address things that we don't like to address. For example, like the crime in our community. How do we handle that? The drugs and the sale of illegal things, how do we handle that? But do we ever think about if we ever take those things out of our community, then what? What happens then? What happens to that grandmother that depend on that money from that grandson that pays for medication? What about those things? And if we don't have trade schools and scholarships to offer these young men, how do we give them an out? But also, how do we explain to this young man to make $300 a week versus $1,000 a week? That's the problem we having with getting these youth to try to see different or see the legal way. I oversee and co-facilitate a youth group. It's called Sons. Sons is a group that's ran through the Urban League of West Michigan. In this group, we work with at-risk youth. And the things you learn from these young men, the things they tell you, the things they tell you about their community and how they see themselves in the community and how they don't have the confidence or how they don't see themselves living past 21 is just amazing. But like I said earlier, I am a stereotype. I'm also the stereotype that did different things. I am the stereotype that chose not to go the route to go to prison. I'm fortunate enough I can say I've never been to prison. But a lot of times we don't like to think or talk or speak on that segment of our community. So what do we do with these young men? How do we take what they've learned and the experiences they have and make it work? We understand that our community is plagued with a million things, and we understand that it's also systematic in the areas of redlining and what redlining did and how it separated us. We also understand how the crack epidemic just tore families apart. We also never talk about Black flight. Black flight happened probably due to the crack epidemic and the crime that's associated with our community. So without those positive people in our community, how do we make it happen? We no longer have the teacher living on the corners. We no longer have the banker living around the corner. We no longer have the one old lady who's been there for 30 years telling kids to pull your pants up. We don't have those things because all our positive people have moved and relocated in other places. Now, I want to be the first to say there's nothing wrong with relocating and starting anew and give your family a better opportunity to grow. But what about the people that's left behind or the trash or whatever you want to call them? Because now what we have in our community is more negative. And everybody understand math, right? So positive 11 plus, hold on, I'm sorry, negative 11 plus positive 7, it still give you negative 4. It'll never be positive if we have more negative people in our community. So how do we build that? What do we do about that? But I do know one thing, and how I think we can do it, in my opinion, and how it works is that we must unify, we must work together, we must come together. We shall not divide ourselves in men, women, or anything else. We need to work together as Black people. We need to close it in. We need to bring it in. We need to get in the huddle. We need to think about group economics. We need to work together on creating group economics. So basically, my passion for community is a plea to everyone. Please, let's work together. Let's get together, men, women, and kids alike. We all need to figure out how do we make this work, because we have one thing for sale that's been on sale forever. Well, I'm sorry, not for sale forever, but it's for sale, and it's culture. That's one thing they stole from us forever, is the culture of our people. So let's find a way to make that work for us. Let's find a way to create our own opportunity.
Thank you, Montel. Now we'd like to, and please mute yourself, Mike Montel. Now we'd like to welcome Brother Cedric Scott to the block. Brother Scott, you need to unmute yourself, Cedric.
Thank you, Will, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity to. What I'm going to do is put a topic out for conversation and exploration. I'm Cedric Scott. I'm CEO and Executive Director of a community counseling center here in Muskegon, Michigan called Lazarus Man Consulting. We provide community counseling for this community, and and I've provided counseling service and psychological services for the community for more than 25 years now. My topic, the subject I want to express is going to sort of piggyback or support what Montel just shared in terms of our personal responsibility, if you will. And the subject is social cultural conditioning. This social cultural conditioning, and I'd also like to predicate this conversation by sharing with you that part of my research and understanding more of it and my deep dive came from a couple profound authors, Dr. Joy DeGroy, who authored a book called PTSS, the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, all part of this social cultural conditioning, and Dr. Claude Anderson, Paranomics, inappropriate behavior, again, part of the social cultural conditioning. And social cultural conditioning is simply inappropriate behavior, if you will, psychological, economically, marginalizing, undervaluing, and underestimating a group of people, which further facilitates a longevity of racism. Racism simply being controlling, having so much control over one group of individuals that we can control their what they get, what they don't have, socially, economically, and disenfranchising individuals from experiencing their own self-worth and power, inability to prosper and grow in a healthy, productive way. So the conversation I'm talking to you about today simply centers around that social cultural conditioning, no longer allowing ourselves to fall prey to the social cultural syndrome, conditioning syndrome, if I like to call it at times, because it's what we do, what we've been taught to do, and to distrust one another and not allow one another to grow and prosper as a group. Racism is simply a race from one group to overpower another. So if we can, and let me further predicate this, but from where this arrives. So this arrived from more than 400 years ago. But let's say it go back to 1705-ish, when there was laws created for meritorious manumissions, if you will. And that simply says that no Black person can prosper from the wealth of their labor, for the fruit of their labor. And so you can only prosper from doing something that would allow white society to prosper, create, invent, develop something that white society can profit from. So that also stems, let's move it fast forward 100 years. It says 1950, when you talk about civil rights and things of that nature, where we further debilitate our ability to prosper with civil rights, not Willie Lynch, but Jim Crow, the discriminatory process that's developing the community that also teaches you that you're less than, undervalued, and marginalized. So we go from 1700s to 1900s and further on. You often hear terms of this social cultural conditioning, another term called in 1950s brainwashing. So let me give you a better example. Social cultural conditioning or inappropriate behavior, such as when my man was beat in California for and by all those police officers in LA. I'm drawing a blank here, but he was beaten, and then after he was beaten, he turns around after he broke his legs, broke his ribs, crushed his skull. He turned around and he says, "Can we all get along?" Also, there's now a break in Detroit, Michigan. 2 boys found in a hotel that Claude Anderson gives an example of, and they're caught there with a white girl, and say police find them there, and they take them back to the precinct, beat him over the head with a shotgun, breaks the shotgun stock after one of the boys' heads. He hit him so hard, one of his eyes fall out on the floor, swells his eye up, and the boy crawls over, grabs the broken shotgun stock on his knees, hands it to the police officer, and says, "I'm sorry, I had a hard head." That is inappropriate behavior. I'm going further now with that when saying inappropriate behavior is when we fail to look at one another for support, fail to group with one another to develop our communities and work together as individuals and people. That is inappropriate behavior. That's my message. That's the topic I'm putting out here today for us all in terms of how do we go further with grouping together and developing the wherewithal, self-worth, understanding of our powers and gifts, and become a community that works in conjunction with one another. I'm not saying don't work with anyone else. I'm not saying not pursue productive careers, but I am saying let's focus also, or more so, on our own communities and develop those communities with businesses and organizations that further us along as individuals and people. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Cedric. Really appreciate it. Great words. We'd now like to welcome Brother Anthony Walker to the block. Brother Walker.
Good evening, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Anthony Earl Walker. I was born and raised in Albion, Michigan. I went to Albion High School. I graduated from Albion, and then I went to Olivet College. At Olivet College, I earned my bachelor's degree in teaching and my master's degree in education. From there, I went to Springport, and I was a head football coach for 5 years there. At 24, I was the youngest head coach at the time in the state. After 5 years of being at Springport, I went to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to teach and coach. From there, I went on to Waverly. That's where I currently am, and I've been there for 23 years. So I've been in education for 30 some odd years, or maybe even more. So I'm going to talk about education. My talk is entitled, "How Can You Make a Difference Educating Our Youth?" What I want to focus on is just a small piece of the bigger puzzle. Let me start by telling you a story. On May 6, 1954, Roger Bannister did something that many said couldn't be done. He ran a sub 4-minute mile. This had never been done before, as it was thought that the human body could not sustain the pressure of running that fast for that long. However, what happened after that was even more astonishing. A few weeks later, it was done again. And then it was done again. And after that, it was done even again. All told, over 1,500 people have done it as of March 2020. What happened? Why? Once people saw Roger do it, they knew that it could be done. And they said, if he can do it, I can do it. That brings me to my small piece of the educational puzzle. A lot of our kids don't get to see or hear about the many Black men and women that are making a difference, a huge difference, in the development of our country. Our school history books are almost devoid of their accomplishments. To let them tell it, Black people were slaves, Lincoln freed the slaves, Martin Luther King marched to stop segregation, and that's the end. This is why I think many of our men and women look to athletes and entertainers as role models and strive to become like them. Now, there's nothing wrong with being an athlete or an entertainer, but there's only so much room on the stage, and very few have the talent or get the breaks to get up on that stage. That's why it's important that our students get exposed to a history book that's inclusive. It wasn't just white people that made our country what it is. Young minds should be exposed to the fact that a Black man, Garrett Morgan, invented the traffic light and the gas mask. A Black man, Dr. Charles Drew, developed a procedure that allows blood to be stored in blood banks. A Black man, Benjamin Banneker, both a mathematician and astronomer, was the surveyor of Washington, D.C. A Black man, Granville Woods, developed the first electric railway system and the first electric roller coaster. And that Thomas Edison actually stole inventions from him. Or Patricia Bath, a Black woman, was a pioneer of laser cataract surgery. Or Mary Van Britten Brown, a Black woman, invented the first home security system. How about Black Wall Street, where Black people were business owners, doctors, lawyers, policemen, and firemen, before white people pillaged, looted, and burned the town down? These are just a few of my favorites. I can go on and on, as there are many who have contributed. Our kids deserve that I can do it moment, like when people saw Roger Bannister do what they said can't be done. That's why I think until the history books are corrected, Black history should be taught as a required course in all schools, as it is also important, in my view, that white kids are exposed to the truth as well, the truth of our history. Perhaps this will help stop some of the white supremacy thoughts before they get started. In closing, I wore this shirt as a shout out to my grandfather, Lewis Bruce, who served in the military and came home to work many years at American Airlines, providing an essential service, and Robert Wall, my Black history teacher back in Albion, and my grandmother, Annetta Jones, who was also a teacher like myself. And finally, my parents, Robert and Annetta Walker, who've been married 60 years and who worked really hard to provide for my siblings and myself. All those people whom I mentioned before, as well as my family, helped inspire me to get an education and to work to provide for my family and also to help others. So in leaving, I also want to say, make sure you get out and vote. This November, it's going to be very important that we do what we have to do to get done what needs to be done. And unless you vote, you don't have a say-so. Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Anthony. Great words, great words. Now we'd like to welcome to the block Mr. Vincent Thomas. Brother Thomas, welcome to the block.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be around good company. I appreciate the words that was expressed from the prior speakers. And my name is Vincent. They call me V. I was born and raised in North Philadelphia. I've relocated to New York in 1992, been here 30 years. And I had an addiction with crack and alcohol abuse. And I mean, believe me, leaving Philadelphia to go to New York was extremely a different environment, a different growth process for me. And thank God, I was able to weather the storm. And I'm gonna tell you the truth, it wasn't an easy storm to weather when you go to different cultures and you're by yourself. But through the grace of God, I'm employed, I have a direction, I have a network of people that care about me and I care about myself more. And I thank God for that blessing. My issue is that as a youth coming up in the Philadelphia community and looking at the progress as far as 40 million Americans, African Americans, 20% are below poverty or poverty stricken. And I ask myself, we're in 2020, how could that still be? And when I look at the dynamics, I see we have a spiritual problem, a mental problem, and physical problem within our communities. How did that come about? The system itself was never forced. It was always rigged to hold us back. And when you said the quarterly grift, I remember the block as being a place where you gather, you did what you did. You knew your community leaders. You knew your rights, your wrong. You knew your neighbor. You knew where you stood at. But you also had a say in your community as far as progression. Nowadays, it's like our children still scroll with the same old abandoned buildings. Go to Philadelphia, it's a dump. Trash piled all everywhere. The community is miseducated. Our community as a whole is miseducated. We have a lack of leadership that really cares about self and not our progress. Look at the income that we spent in our communities and take out of our communities to help others benefit from our work. We don't bring it back to ourselves because we're too busy trying to impress each other with materialistic things that take from our community and our growth. As a brother, as a father, which I am not, but as just a citizen and seeing the deplorable conditions that still plague our communities, run down schools. We have infrastructure that's totally collapsed, that's totally irreparable because a quick Band-Aid will solve this problem. Our children are in horrible conditions. You know, we look at the plight as far as where is the growth? Where are our leaders who actually represent us? We need outside sources as far as resources also, but we need to start with ourselves. I could point the finger at you. What about me? What am I doing to be proactive instead of criticizing what's not being done? And the reality is that we need a wake-up call for ourselves. And I think once we understand that we are worth being recognized and take our self-unification as a group of people and not divide each other because of our hatred, because of our dislike towards each other, this is what it was designed to do, to divide us from being who we truly are. We are a great people. We have great minds. We also have to utilize our resources to build for ourselves. You know, we can't keep relying on outside sources to tell us what to do. That's like police brutality. If the community is involved and everybody's included in community development, that would probably cut down on your crime rate when you have people who can be delivered as role models. You know your place where you stand, but you grow and develop as one. Where you can have less crime, when you have sources for these young brothers like rec centers, wages where you can sustain a decent living, when you have medical facilities where you can take care of your old, you can respect your elders. Today, man, we live in a system, man, that I never did like America. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's a great country, but how great is it for us? All the sweat, the sacrifices, all we've done, we're still in last place. When does it stop? Because reality is not about a race, it's about equality and recognizing us as people. It's not the men only, it's the women and the children. When you got children growing up in environments that are decaying day by day, and it's passed to the next generation, where is the progress? It shows me it's stagnated. It shows me that we don't even matter. And I beg to differ because we do matter. I don't hold any PhD, I don't hold any credentials, but I do recognize and analyze my situation from the time I was born to this present day, and I still see the same conditions that was there 40 years ago. And it bothers me when I see older brothers who still think they're 23 years old, pants off their back, you know what I mean, hat to the back. Do you? But the thing is though, man, even you play a part too, to be an asset in the community and developing us going forward. You know, it's sad to me, man, and I don't vote, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm gonna vote this year. You know why I'm gonna vote? Because I need to make a change or a difference too. And it's important that I go out there and decide this right because I understand the sacrifices that were made. My only problem is that, will the vote really count? Give me an ROI, return on my investment, where I know it truly matters because reality is though, we go for the same agenda every 4 years, hoping for change. Change comes about, but we still have to go to obstacles to really be heard. And that's very sad when we put faith in people to carry out laws to benefit us where they benefit and we still suffer. We live in 50 corporations, 50 states. Each state has its own jurisdiction. Each state calls the shots in what they want to. When it comes to our voices, it's like, okay, I hear you, but in reality, like, we'll get you later. Has to stop. We have strong black women. We have strong black leaders. We need strong stuff for ourselves to trust each other. And not always look down on each other, but to make a sacrifice, man. If it comes to sacrifice your life for it, then I need to be necessary, man. We need to stop being dependent and do for ourselves, but respect each other, man, and have a factor where we can benefit. Without God, time is running short. And the time is of the essence, brothers. But right now, time is ticking. And with that, I appreciate comments, but for me personally, what can I do? That's the whole thing. What part do I play? Reality, man, it's a real struggle and it continues on, but we need to understand which part we play and how we come together instead of by ourselves amongst each other. That's all I have for you, gentlemen. I'm out.
Thank you, Brother V. Really appreciate it. Very strong words. Thank you, Brother V. Mute yourself, Brother V, please. And we like to bring Brother Anthony Smith to the block. Brother Smith, welcome to the block.
Well, thank you, Will. I appreciate the remarks of all of these men that came before me. I'm a brother here in the city of Detroit. I've worked for the city of Detroit in economic development and affordable housing for the past 25 years. I'm a product of the city. I was educated here. Some of my background, very briefly, I've been involved in education. I've been a president of a charter school. I've been involved in the Michigan Democratic Party as a precinct delegate. I've been involved with making millionaires in terms of the affordable housing business for for-profit and nonprofit developers. And, you know, I thank you for this opportunity. Before I go into anything further, I'd like to just really say that, you know, before I speak, I like to give honor to the ancestors, because you got to begin to look at the past and the mistakes that was created in the past and how we get to where we want to be in the future. So I like to really talk about very briefly action and moving forward. But before I do that, I like to talk about our ancestors who are purposely excluded from the history books. You know, one of the things about African people is that we have been disconnected from our African heritage and our African culture and our African past. And we forget, and the history books omit the fact that African people brought science to the world. African people brought mathematics to the world. They brought medicine to the world. They brought philosophy and music and even God consciousness to the world. And so when you have a recognition of how great you was in history, that begins to build the self-esteem that's necessary to fuel the engine for change. And so all of those things that are excluded, we need to pay homage to, and we need to recognize, and we need to have discussions about that with our community groups, with our neighbors, with our children every day, because that builds up the self-esteem and the energy that you need to make a change. And I say ashe to that. Sometimes we say amen, and in the African language, sometimes we say ashe. And that means granting all power to the mission and moving forward. So how do we change the conditions, and how do we move the cart forward in terms of getting out of a predicament that we're in America to where we want to be? One of the things that we have to begin to recognize is when we look at the glass, sometimes we look at the bottle as being half full. Sometimes we look at it as being half empty. I look at it as being half full, because when you look at the history of African people in this country, number one, we were brought here as property. We were somebody's property. We were slaves. We were 3/5 of a human being. And so that put a social and a psychological condition in our mindset that we need to eradicate so that we can begin to take charge and move the needle forward, because nobody is going to do this for us. You know, Black people in this country, we've been hustled, we've been pimped. And when I say pimped, I mean P-I-M-P. Put it in my pocket. Other people are putting our dollars, our economic resources in their pockets. In the Black community, we spend all of our money with everybody else. Matter of fact, we spend about 97% to 98% of all of our resources with everybody else. And what that means is this. That means that other groups are spending 197% of income when we're left to spend 2%. And we got to change that. We got to begin to think in terms of our pride and our history and our culture and start to uplift ourselves, because nobody else is going to do this for us. When you talk about housing development, There are many religious institutions, churches, synagogues that sponsor affordable housing around the city, what the city of Detroit has lent millions of dollars to. That is something that we want to continue so that we can bring affordable housing opportunities that not only bring just the housing opportunities, it brings jobs as well. But we need to change that paradigm of looking at ourselves and looking at other people to help us. Instead of looking for them to help us, we got to begin to help ourselves. So how do we do that? Number one, I think we have to change our spending habits. We got to stop buying the Gucci. We got to stop drinking the cognacs. We got to stop directing our money into places that are not going to be productive for us as a people. So how do we do that? We got to begin to re-educate ourselves about the economics of America. You know, being brought here as a chattel property and now gaining our freedom. So now, you know, we're at a crossroad where we're looking at our situation and we're saying we're on the bottom. We're on the bottom of the economic ladder. Well, we got to begin to understand that we're really not on the bottom of the economic ladder. Black people have a lot of spending power. We're very wealthy. We just don't spend our money in a group, and we don't spend it collectively. We don't practice group economics and we don't practice group politics. And when we begin to do that, we will come up that economic ladder. We would climb that economic ladder so fast, we would be amazed as to how much money that we spent in the community and city of Detroit just this weekend on probably cigarettes and liquor and things that are negative. And so we got to change that spending habit. We got to begin to re-educate ourselves because this system is not educating us. When we look at what we're getting from the public colleges and the public institutions, we're learning somebody else's story. And we got to begin to learn our story and create our story. When you look at an example, the island of Haiti, and they say, well, Haiti is the poorest country, poorest nation in the world. Well, they only poor because they had to pay the French for 100 years, billions of dollars that they paid the French. And so you got to begin to look at this. You know, what conditions created poverty in Haiti? That's an example, because if you look at Haiti and you look at Detroit, Detroit almost mirrors Haiti. It's set for economic explosion for African-American people, but we got to recognize it. In Detroit, African-American people are 80% of the population. Most of us are not taking the vote seriously, and we're not taking our money seriously. We're spending that money with other people. We're relying on people to educate us. For example, again, during the COVID-19, we're all sitting back waiting for the school system to open up so that they can educate our children. We forgot that we have to continually educate our children every day, because when somebody else controls the education and the information that you are fed and that your children are fed, you know, what do you expect? You can't expect for them to give you information that's going to empower you. So we have to begin to take this mantle, take this ring, take the steps, and begin to do action plans. We have to meet in these Zoom calls, and we have to begin to support each other economically and generate our dollars within ourselves, because nobody else is going to do this for us. We can look at the current administration, and whether or not you look at the Trump administration or whether or not you look at the Obama administration. My question to both of them is, how many Black billionaires and how many Black millionaires did you create? You have to begin to assess your situation and think outside of the box when you start talking about economic resources. We have the resources in the community. We just don't spend them wisely enough to generate them over and over and over again in terms of dividends for ourselves. We need to not always look to going to college and getting a job, but maybe go to college and start your own business. Start a situation where if you are a psychologist, maybe you want to not work for a local hospital. As the brother, I believe Cedric was talking about earlier, he works for himself. And so we need to begin to not rely on other people to provide jobs and opportunities for us, but to take our knowledge, our skill, and create opportunities for ourselves. There's nothing wrong with practicing group economics with Black people and being pro-Black. When you talk about racism, racism is a group sport. And when you talk about, racism, racism is now economics. It's being shut out of the business opportunities. It's being shut out of the jobs. And so we need to look at within the community, what do we have in terms of our current resources, brain trust, organizations, etc., and put them to use, because reparations may be coming and they may not. But we have to begin to create our own reparations. We have to begin to take that and just move this needle forward. And if you look at the Black community, if you go on any block in the city of Detroit, I guarantee you could find a talented carpenter, automotive engineer, plumber. We have the skills, we have the talent. We're just not making the right decisions. And we need to talk to brothers in this form, like we're on the block here. We can go out on the block in the community and begin to talk to brothers and show them that, hey, you don't need to spend your time drinking, smoking. Spend your money wisely and you will begin to elevate yourself. You can buy houses in the city of Detroit. You could buy a house a few years ago for $500, and I believe you still can today. And if you buy that, then you own something, so you can begin to create your wealth within yourself and within your family. This thing about education is really important to me, because I believe that Black folks are miseducated and we're not looking at the situation accurately. And if we begin to look at it accurately and reflect upon the examples of our ancestors, I believe we'll come to the right decision. We have to reprogram ourselves socially, economically, and our habits in order to move forward. We have to begin to value ourselves. When we talk about things like the Black Lives Movement, which I'm a proponent of the Black Lives Movement, but the thing about it is we have to react just as strongly when we see one brother killing another brother. We have to go out and march on him as well, because we have to begin to value our lives for ourselves. Nobody's going to value you. Nobody's going to pull us up. We look at a lot of times, when we are in our religious churches, mosques, synagogues, sometimes we're praying. And I think that, God doesn't have any feet or any hands but the one that he gave you. And with those hands and with those feet and with that mind, God is able to help you to help yourself. And this is the philosophy that I want to bring to all of the brothers. We don't have to look for somebody else. We have it within ourselves. We have it within our communities. We have it within our families. And I just have a passion and a love for Black people and to see African people do well. And I want to be a part of that. I'm out every day, not only in my professional capacity, but just in my personal capacity, working with young brothers to try to get them involved in economic development and to get them involved in terms of political action, voting, and participating in America, because America is based on group politics. And if we don't strengthen the group, then we have nothing. And so when you look at how other people were able to climb the economic ladder in America, they all work together. And this is what we have to begin to do We have to begin to love one another. We have to begin to embrace the differences that we have, whether the differences is in how we look at things religiously, socially, but we have to begin to unite based upon something common, and that's the survival of our children. We are here to prepare the road for our children. And that's why I say with the COVID, we can't wait for the school system. This is a great opportunity. If you begin to look at something, as I mentioned earlier, half empty or half full, we need to continue with education, even if our kids are not in school, because you don't know what they're being taught 8 hours a day. But if you take it upon yourself to educate your children around history, around mathematics, and you can do it as soon as you discover that all of your ancestors were great people, and you really hold your head up high and really have a sense of pride, then anything is possible. Everything is possible. Nothing is not within your reach to be able to grasp. When you look at our children, they catch on to concepts, ideas in a second, in a nanosecond. So all you have to do is teach them right one time and then get out of their way. They'll do it. You have to be there to guide them. So education and educating our children is something that we have to begin to do. And I think with that, that's about everything that I wanted to bring to the block today.
Thank you, Brother Anthony. We really appreciate it. Great words. Now we'd like to bring Brother Brian Ennis to the block. Brother Ennis, welcome to the block. You got to unmute yourself, Brother Brian.
Yeah, I just want to give thanks to and thankful to all the powerful words that was spoken. Such a great cloud of witnesses of men that spoke a lot of truth. My name is Brian Ennis. I was born in Omaha, Nebraska. I was raised and I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. Graduated from high school in 1979. I was blessed to go to the oldest historically Black college and university, Wilberforce University in Wilberforce, Ohio. I was fortunate to graduate there in 1984 with a bachelor's degree in accounting. From there, I joined the United States Marine Corps in 1987, right, what brought me to California, where I currently live. I've been in California since 1987. I currently reside in Anaheim, California. I am currently working for the Orange County Assessor's Office. I've been there since September of 1991. Next month will mark my 29th year for the Assessor Department. I take a blessing and pride that I am the first and still the only African-American managing audit appraiser over the audit division in the department, where I oversee billions of dollars in property tax value. I graduated and got my master's degree from Talbot School of Theology, University of Biola University, and I currently serve under the direction of my pastor, David Lanto Jr., where I currently worship at Victory Baptist Church of Anaheim. With that said, I want to talk for a very brief time about understanding the importance of democracy. One may ask, what is democracy? As I looked up this definition, you'll find varying definitions among that. It basically comes from a Greek term. It's broken down in two words, right? Meaning demos, which is the people, or kratos, which means the rule. So therefore it means that the people rule, right? When we talk about this, it is a form of government in which the people have the authority to choose their governing legislation, who people are and how authority is shared amongst the core issues for democratic theory. Development and constitution is the things we need to understand about the definition of democracy. Democracy, in contrast to dictatorship or tyranny, thus focuses on opportunities for the people to control their leaders and to oust them without a need for revolution. It's about being nonviolent, but it's also about having a public stance that we can protest in a nonviolent situation. So you may ask this definition, Brian, so what's the point? Well, the point is knowledge is the key to understanding. When we understand that something, it opens up our mind to realize what it is that I have to do according to what I've been placed on this earth to be, right? In relation to democracy, we can enter into the change we want within the country that we live in. Second thing I want to say is this, I ask the question, is the United States of America a democracy? The United States of America is a democracy, but it's not a true democracy. Instead, it is a representative democracy. The common forms of democracy are direct democracy and representative democracy. A direct democracy is a system of government in which the majority have their say on every matter concerning governance. The United States representative democracy, or we know it more importantly, or AKA, it's a republic. Citizens do not directly vote on laws, rather they elect representative, that is the House of Representatives and the Senate. Can I pause right here for a second and to get and insert a parenthetical insert right here? What is stated here is the Constitution for the United States of America. I remember as a kid, man, you know what? I am and have been, will always be a cartoon head, man. It's just it's gonna be that way. One of my favorite was Schoolhouse Rock. I don't know if you understand or know what Schoolhouse Rock is. I'm dating myself because I'm nearly 60 years old. One of them, they were talking about the preamble to the Constitution. Remember how I go, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. The question is, who is the people in we the people? Some humans in this union at the framing of this document were not given full representation. We can see it in section 2 of the Constitution states that some people were considered 3/5 of all persons when we're talking about being representative in this democracy. But it was later changed by the section 2 of the 14th Amendment. What's the point? The Constitution is a great document. The good news is it has been and will always need to be amended because we are progressing. If we are in a democracy, whether we have a religious belief or not, this country is going to progress toward the majority of what the people say. That's just how the Constitution laid it out. You can argue with me later about that, right? Because it can be exploited, we need to understand what democracy is all about. Last thing I want to say is this, right? What shall we do with this simple understanding that I put forth from us, right? First thing is we need to build relationship. Build relationship with somebody you don't know, somebody you want to know. One of the things I'm building a relationship with my pastor. My pastor is born of German and Mexican heritage. He and I has entered into this relationship that we want to be friends. One thing he had put on my mind, he said, Brian, you need to carry around this right here. This is a pocket vest of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. He and I also started reading this book called Letters to a Birmingham Jail. Read this, man. It's an excellent book, right? Second thing is proclaim your representation. Know your representative. Know your senator, right? Educate others. Somebody that you don't know. Get into a conversation, right? What is the point? I am a man. I am somebody. And I can affect change when I understand the rights that I have within the Constitution of the United States that I live and call my home. Fill out your census. I'm going to tell you right now, fill out your census because it's the basis of your representation, which forms our democracy. And last thing, a couple people said it, vote for every election, not just the national election. Vote for the local election because the great Tip O'Neill said this, all politics are local because they shape our democracy. And that's all I have to say. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Brother Brian. Great words. Really appreciate it. Thank you for coming to the block. Please mute yourself. And we'd like to bring our last brother to the block. We all need, we've all had some wisdom from all these brothers. Now we're going to get some wisdom from one of our youthful brothers. We'd like to bring Brother Gino Washington to the block. Welcome, Brother Gino.
How you doing, Will? My name's Gino Washington. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, but I was raised in Southfield, Michigan, which is a city on the border. I am named after a famous Detroit singer named Gino Washington, who just so happens to be my uncle. I also have lived in Hong Kong, China. I've lived in Chicago. I lived in Milwaukee. I moved from Chicago, and now I'm down here in Spanish Fort, Alabama. A little bit about my background. Went to Michigan State University. I graduated with a degree in environmental science and a second degree in Chinese. I have worked as a teacher. I've worked as an activist. I have worked as a coach. I've worked in science and sustainability. So I've done a lot of things, and I have a lot of hobbies, whether it be video games, whether it be reading a lot, like I'm addicted to reading, all this drawing. But the whole point is like, you're like, well, you're going all over the place, you know? Well, my point is I'm a polymath. So what is a polymath? A polymath is somebody who's took it upon themselves to be knowledgeable in a lot of different fields. I love to learn, so therefore I'm knowledgeable in a lot of things. And so with that, I want to talk today about research. One thing that I learned, you know, growing up in my household with my two great parents, you know, my dad was a teacher, my mom's a nurse, which exposed me to a lot. I joined a fraternity that helped me out, Omega Psi Phi, which exposed me to a lot. And, you know, the thing is, I feel like sometimes as Black folks and even just people in general, especially in America, we get bamboozled, hoodwinked, and led astray because people don't know how to do their research. And in the time of COVID-19 and conspiracy theories, you have to know how to do your research and verify things because it can be life or death. So I'm going to go a little bit different than everybody else has kind of been. You know, I look at it as kind of the end of normal. So during my time, I might also like recommend a few books because I always see bookshelves and nobody's using them in these videos. So you know, so we're going to lead the block a little bit, and I'm going to just talk about filtering out how to filter through information because I feel like as a Black community, when we learn how to do this, we can actually figure out easier what we need to do to get ahead, you know, focus on the past, but we got to move forward. Okay. So first off, I'm going to start with the main thing we're on right now. Right now we're on Facebook Live. I know we're on YouTube Live. I'm going to talk about filtering information on the internet. The internet's a great thing. It's brought us all together today, but the internet also kind of sucks because there's a lot of bad information. So you got to think about there's something called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which was passed in, I believe, 1996, right? That allows people to put things on websites that aren't true. And what I've seen a lot of times, especially from a lot of my Black folks, other people too, but I'm more concerned when it's us, when it's members of my family, when it's my friends, when it's other people in my community. We don't look and figure out what's true and what's not. So I like to look at logic. I like to look at something called Occam's razor. Occam's razor means essentially the easiest thing you see, like the most simplest explanation is probably the most likely one. For example, it's raining outside. I see a flash of light. It could be aliens, but it probably is just lightning. Or one I got from a lot of people I know when the COVID started. So COVID might be a hoax. COVID, this is the government trying to control us. They're trying to do this and that to us. I'm looking at it like, if everybody's not at work, nobody's making money. If I cough, it stops me from spreading germs if I'm sneezing. So a mask probably does the same thing and it probably works. And on top of that, the government can't even send everybody checks for $1,200. They can't get that right. Nor can they stop people from not wearing masks. Nor can they stop in Michigan. They couldn't even stop people with guns coming to the Capitol. So they're obviously not controlling this. It's probably real. Guess I was right. I was wearing my mask down here in Alabama where a lot of people thought it was a hoax. And I'm on the border with Florida. It's really bad down here. All right. So one ways to do that is when you learn something new, sometimes I'm like, don't let it scare you. Look up and figure out where you can get it from. So what I mean by that is, you know, I have a lot of books. Like I said, I want to learn some things about physics, for example. All right. How do I make it easy? I like manga. I'm going to buy the manga book, Guide to Physics. Maybe later on, I'll move to something more complex. Shoot, I have a superhero guide to physics right here. So the thing is, you know, I see a lot of people believing that 5G causes coronavirus that never just took the time to check out the manga guide to physics at the store and see, like, you know, is that how radio waves work? How does it make viruses? Or like you see people posting tweets, memes and stuff, but they don't know. You don't go to Twitter, look and see if it's true. if somebody retweet that, you see an interview with a politician, like maybe so-and-so said this, it sounded kind of racist. Maybe I should listen to the whole interview. Maybe I should get a book, you know, because you, like I said, you go on YouTube necessarily, you can't sue them if you say false information. My girlfriend works for CBS. If she says something false on air, she can be sued for defamation. She can post something on YouTube. I can post something on YouTube. You can't sue YouTube. People lie. So you should like read a book, get experts, look and see somebody's credentials. Are they a PhD? Do they work in this field? You know, and then that's how you research. It's not just looking at stuff and saying, oh, this sounds like something that is already heard before. That's called confirmation bias. And that prevents us from falling, like I said, being bamboozled about things that ain't true. Example, crime. Some people might believe black on black crime is bad. Well, it is, but there's crime everybody for every race. You got to look at it. A few weeks ago, had a white guy talking to my cousin, talking about, you know, police going on black people isn't that bad because we commit so much crime. I actually helped my cousin out. I went to the FBI's website. They literally have the crime log and they tell you what people are charged with. And for the majority of crimes, white people committed the majority of them in the country. And with drug crimes, it was like 73%, according to 2017 statistics, which really, you look at it, only leaves 27% for everybody else, which is pretty bad. You get a book like the new Jim Crow. Most of the people in prison look like me. However, we don't commit 70% of the drug crimes, but we're in prison for it. So, you know, we have to like look at stuff like that so we don't think bad about each other, so that we know what we can attack. So that we can take care of ourselves. Black people are dying of COVID at a higher rate than other groups of people. It's really us and Native Americans. And it's kind of like, you know, well, I think a lot of it is because sometimes we just don't know when to trust or ask people in our community, doctors, scientists, or even if you don't trust things, get a book out yourself. I used to read my mama's medical books when I was in middle school. I like the pictures, but at the same time, I'm older and I realize I know a lot more stuff than a lot of my peers now. My mother said my mother was a nurse. So and it's never too late to start to try to learn. And, you know, that's why a lot of times if I'm arguing with somebody or committing a point, I know that point already. I've researched on it. And if I don't know much about it, I'm really usually not saying much. All right. And that's going to lead me to the next thing. So something that in the last few years that I've really researched that I've gotten into is finance. One day in I was around about 4 or 5 years ago, I'll say around 2016. I was looking like, no matter what I do, no matter how much I make, I'm still ended up kind of broke every month. And I need to wait for this check. What am I doing wrong? What's the next step? Something's not working. I'm gonna research how to do a budget. And to me, this is really important because as Black folks, we always talk about, we know we've been redlined. We know that we've had land that has been taken by the KKK. We know that people, when they've been breadwinners, like in Tulsa in 1919, people talk about, or 1920 rather, that they would destroy our communities. But there are other ways we can pull ourselves up. And one of those ways is finance, So the Federal Reserve every single year, and you can look this up too, they do a survey of Americans. All right. And I believe it was 2017. They have 2018 and 2019. One of those years, they said that only 47% of all Americans have $400 for an emergency. Now, I'm sure when it comes to Black Americans, because there is a wealth gap that's well researched because of the things they have done to us in the past to make sure we can't build generational wealth easily, it's probably a lot more than 47%. So when I try to look into what are things that other people do that we don't do, I mean, everybody talks about entrepreneurship, but what I got into was investing. And I have a friend who's an artist who really talked to me about it for about a year. And I started and I realized it really wasn't that hard. Now, 2016, Harvard Business Review came out with a paper saying that even if a white family and a Black family makes $300,000, the white family has an exponentially higher chance of getting to $1 million. The difference, Black people are more conservative. We don't invest. And when we do have our own businesses, we don't invest as much back into our business. And then if you're at the lower end of the spectrum and you don't have $350,000, because I know I don't, you have to learn how to budget. So there are tools for that, and there are ways to learn. So one of my favorite books I read, The Index Card, really simple. 10 rules you could put on an index card to save money. The Intelligent Investor, walking down a random walk down Wall Street. Mint.com is a good website to learn how to budget. Another website I like, you need a budget.com. There are tools out there. And the thing you got to realize is that you have to have discipline. Discipline is a great form of self-love, because discipline is putting off what you want now for greater rewards later. You know, I know a lot of people, you know, like I said, like that, well, they got to have a clothes now. They got to have a car now. But at the end of the day, if you're getting the BMW because you got a new job, but you could barely really afford it, and you're over here getting a loan on the BMW, you're paying, or any car really, you're paying thousands of more dollars than if you had just budgeted, drove a lemon, and saved your money to buy a car in cash. But that comes with financial literacy, reading up on stuff, learning things. Another thing I do, I go on CNBC, I find stories of people that are like my age, that are debt-free, that are millennials, a lot of them Black, and a lot of them other races. Doesn't really make a difference. And I follow, maybe I don't make much money as them, but what steps can I follow to get where they've got it? And and what is realistic with my lifestyle? What can I cut? All right. Now, with that, with financial literacy, with financial power, that means we got to get away from being materialistic, because there are a lot of materialistic things that people get into in the Black community. As people always say, we're consumers, and I'm not shaming nobody for that. I'm just saying that if you do it smartly. If you can, discipline yourself, all right, so that you can wait to get it down the line. And like I said, I've used Robinhood is good for investing, Fidelity, Investopedia, books, taking ownership instead of loans. Like I said, save your money to buy that car in cash instead of getting a loan. Like, start doing things like that, because our ancestors, a lot of times, have access to the information that we get in the same way that they have. I have a phone, I got a bookshelf, and, you know, racism still exists, but I don't have to worry as much as my grandparents and my parents had to. So another thing I want to bring attention to is learning about environmental issues. Now, this is something I don't really hear talked about a lot, but it's really important and dear to my heart with dealing with the Black community, because I got into environmental science because when I was in high school and early in college, I noticed how oftentimes when pollution and things happen, it happens in our communities. And this comes from a lack of financial power, going back to what I just said. This comes from a lack of knowing how to do research, to know what we're looking at. You get what I'm saying? And know if it's true. And this goes with a lack of knowing how to, knowing how to leverage the political power we may have. So I believe it was Brian talked about democracy and knowing our power in that democracy. So I'm gonna give you an example. In New York University School of Medicine did a study a few years ago, got covered in Chicago Tribune. I lived in Chicago, Streeterville neighborhood on the north side. I lived on the north side. I live further north than there though. Average life expectancy is 90. Go down to Inglewood, which is, in the south side, average life expectancy is around 60 years old. What's the difference? It's the environment. It's not just the crime and stuff. It's about what type of food are they eating? Is there more factories there? Is there pollution? There's an incinerator in Detroit near on the east side, right across the 375 or down there. They burn garbage there. Asthma rates are like some of the worst in the entire state. You go down River Rouge and to Southwest Detroit near the steel factories, you have high rates of cancer. You have chemical like manganese in the air, which causes people to be insulin resistant, which increases diabetes. So oftentimes I think that we don't realize that they're putting these things in our communities and we're not paying attention. We're not knowing what to do. We don't realize our power, because the people that own these factories, that own this incinerator, or the people that are running things in Flint, when they made the water polluted, they're not living in that community. We got to use our power. And going back to democracy, we have to figure out who these people are. And we have got to figure out how to vote them out, take control of things, run ourselves. And one way of doing that is to become more financially powerful. Like when I've invested in the past year, I'm up over 50% in the past year. It doesn't take that much money. It just takes the willpower and the discipline to do it. When it comes, and when you have money, you can run a campaign. You can give things to you can learn. You have more freedom to do what you want. You could push candidates you want. And not only that, learn the system. So we have 3 branches of our government. All right. So we have the judicial, we have the legislative, and we have the executive. Everybody want to blame the mayor. Everybody want to blame the president. Everybody want to blame the governor. All right. People tend to ignore sometimes the legislator. You got to know who's on your city council. Are they for you? You can run for your city council. It's not as expensive as running for Congress. You know, you can push a campaign in your neighborhood, get those people out if they're not doing anything for you. You know, I'm always amazed that now that I'm living in the South, and I know there are reasons like that, like voter suppression, but it amazes me that there's so many black people in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi, yet racists keep winning the national office. So and then the other aspect of that is we got to get lists of these people, figure out how to circulate around the community and vote these people out. Judicial. We talk about the school to prison pipeline all the time. I just had this book, New Jim Crow. It's just about it, you know, but a lot of judges get voted in. In Chicago 2 years ago, I remember there was a judge running and a campaign started to get him out of office because the Chicago police had been beating people into confessions for about 30 years. And there were some people who had false evidence against them and they knew it was true. And this judge would not let them get retrials from prison. But if people weren't paying attention, that judge is still on the bench. He was the first judge voted out of Chicago in 30 years. But those are the types of things that we have to be doing. I think the reason that people are so mad in the country, the reason that, you know, we're protesting, at least my generation, is because, you know, we feel like stuff isn't changing. And if you look through our history, when stuff does not change and people are constantly trampling on the bottom, that's when you get revolution or drastic change because people don't feel like the government is legitimate. Doesn't matter if you're Russia, China, Iran, USSR, even the US, we don't like to think about it, but it's possible if we don't figure out how to take power in our democracy. So that's kind of just what I wanted to talk about. And one last thing, going back to the environmental thing, nutrition, learn how to garden, and learning your family history. So with me, my biggest research project I've done the last few years is I want to tell all my young people and even my older folks, look into your family history. When I was in 6th grade, I had a teacher have me do a family tree. It was great. I talked to my grandma a lot about it. She was born in 1925. My grandfather was born in 1927. My other grandparents, 1916, 1917. My parents are even older. My dad, if he was still alive, will be 75 years old. My mom is 69. I'm 31. They had me old. And I think it's great because, you know, that means I have a direct link to older things. So like I can talk. So I've been trying to put my family tree together. I've used Ancestry. I've used 23andMe, and I use my older folks to know what they know. Like, for example, I have cousins don't believe in vaccines. Not only do I know biology, so I know how they work in a way that I feel like some of them are friends too, who may not have actually opened a biology book to actually understand it. I can also talk to old people in my family and be like, hey, you talked to my great uncle 2 years ago. Hey, what's your aunt die of? Yellow fever? Oh, dang, you don't even hear about that anymore. What this person die of? Oh, dysentery, diphtheria. Oh, found out my grandma wanted to move. My mom was born in Texas in 1951. My grandma wanted to move up north because, well, not only because of Jim Crow, but because Texas had a big problem with polio. Don't really hear about that anymore. So I'm like, okay, that's probably not true. And it's probably a conspiracy based on the fact that I don't even see these diseases anymore. So we have to use those tools. And I think it gives you pride as a people, knowing where I come from, because a lot of black folks don't. Like, you know, I have, like I said, when my mother and my father were born, there were still slaves alive in their family. You know, so when somebody tries to say, oh, it's a long time ago, no, it wasn't. My mom was born in 1951. She had a great uncle that lived to be in his late 90s that was born 2 years after Reconstruction. His sister was my mom's great grandma. She was born in 1857, a slave. You know, my girlfriend just did a story last week. She's a journalist. I said earlier in about a high school in Alabama where some girls had a shirt with the Confederate flag and they didn't think anything was wrong with it. A narrative down in the South is that the war was about states' rights. That's what they teach them. But like I said, doing your research, and this goes for black folks too, when we hear random stuff, even about us. See, I know we want to take pride, but even about us, like, you know, those people, some of them are just racist, but some of them are probably taught in school states' rights. Well, all you got to do is look at the Articles of Secession that the states themselves wrote in 1861 to see that they were doing that war because they thought that black people were inferior. And it's very, very clear. So, like I said, I've learned a lot about my family. Like I said, I've learned I had a great grandfather that served in the Civil War on the Union side. I've learned that, you know, that same great uncle I mentioned that lived to be in his late 90s was one of the founders of the NAACP. So I think that that's something that everybody should look into. Use your older folks, get into your history, learn how to research, like really learn how to research. And that's all I have today.
Thank you, Gino. Anytime someone wants to say that our young men have no knowledge, remember this, okay? Because I I really appreciate it. Thank you, Gino, for bringing that more youthful ideology to the block. The block really needed it. Now, as we prepare to leave the block for the night, I'd like to contribute to the gumbo of conversations. I'd like to thank the ancestors for their dreams of a better world for me and those of my generation after. Even though they experienced the worst of humanity, they never lost their humanity. Because of their bruises, tears, embarrassment, scars, forced limitations, humiliation, dog bites, rejections, bloodshed, whip marks, and deaths, I and others have had the opportunity to be a product of integration on the shoulders of sharecroppers, field workers, hustlers, putwooders, miners, factory workers, day workers, and other marginalized and exploited Black workers who were just trying to live the American dream that was available to them. But by being the strong, diligent people that history has shown them to be, we meet tonight at this virtual block to honor them and to show them we understand that because of who we are and where we are, we must stay vigilant and committed. I'm sure some of my more radical friends would say, you see, that's the problem. We thought it was all about integration. And we thought that once we got integrated, all the problems would be solved. But Dr. King told us in his last book, where do we go from here? Chaos, community or chaos? Dr. King said, and I quote, I come upon something that disturbs me deeply. We have fought hard and long for integration, as I believe we should have, and I know we will win. But I have come to believe that we are integrating into a burning house. I'm afraid that America has lost the moral vision that she may have had. I'm afraid that even as we integrate, we'll walk into a place that does not understand that this nation needs to be deeply concerned with the plight of the poor and disenfranchised. Until we commit ourselves to ensuring that the underclass is given justice and opportunity, we will continue to perpetrate the anger and violence that tears at the soul of this nation. I fear I'm integrating my people into a burning house. But when Dr. King was asked, what should we do? His response was, we must become firemen. Let us not stand by and let the house burn. As a product of the Baptist Church, as a product of the first graduating class of Head Start, as a product of Buttermilk Bottom, as a product of Miss Jones and Miss Baxter's Sunday School class, as a product of an HBCU, as a product of small town love and isolation, as well as having witnessed big city glamour and desolation, as a product of Mr. Wall's ethnic study class, as the oldest child of George and Pearlie Mae, as a product of Wilberforce, as a proud property owner on Addison and Austin Avenue, as a father of two beautifully intelligent women, I understand that we've been given an assignment to be proud, strong people against continuing changing bombardment. Black men and Black women have planted the seeds for centuries in this country, whether those seeds were cotton, beans, tobacco, or seeds of liberty, justice, and equity for the betterment of our country. Black folks have been the planters and the harvesters, but the availability of real seats at the table to enjoy the feast produced from the planting and the harvest has been extremely limited over the years. As we prepare to leave the block, I'd like to make a plea to all the Black men and women listening and those who are not. Because of the results of COVID-19, most of our children will not be going to a physical school this fall. But what the COVID-19 virus has shown us is that education, resources, and critical thinking will be more important than ever as our great country matures. A 2019 study by the Brookings Institute stated that 4 following areas will be the needed skill set to be employed in 2030 and beyond: digital literacy and computation thinking, judgment and decision making, emotional and social intelligence, creative and innovative mindset. The study also stated that 40% of the jobs today will be obsolete by 2030. So what that is telling us is that it is going to be more important than ever that our children can read well, are wonderfully comfortable with math, and have the emotional inner support and inside of them to deal with constantly challenging factors. So let us gain strength. Let us gain a renewed strength and understanding from the block. So if you want to be able to stop having to shake your head in disgust because you see a young man with their pants sagging and sadly their aspirations are lower than their pants, we know we have work to do, because it's not going to get better by doing nothing, because time has shown that. When you see a young man in a store and their ability to speak a clear sentence is as chilling as when you see a young man in a store and their ability to speak a clear sentence is as challenging to them as physics is to you, we have a problem. When you know far too many of our children who, for whatever reasons, families and environment is not ready for this abrupt change in the education process, we have a problem. And doing nothing will not help. As the great Marvin Gaye said so prophetically, we must save the babies. Because we have been told since the inception of our great country to live up, we have been told since the inception for our gun, because we have been told since the inception of our great country to truly live up to its creed, all ships must rise. Well, I just want to let black men know that we are the barometer of this country. When our employment goes up, the country's employment rates go up. When black boys' test scores go up, the entire school system scores go up. When our incarceration rates go down, the entire country incarceration rates go down. When we get good health care and take good care of ourselves physically and mentally, the overall mental and physical health of the country significantly improves. When our home ownership rates go up, so does the country. When our graduation rates skyrocket, so does the entire country. When we stop killing each other, the murder rate of the entire nation significantly decreases. When we stand up, folks notice. When we read, the whole family reads. When we go to church, mosque, temple, or hall, the whole family goes. We are the barometer of this country. We have a lot more in common with Simon the Cyrenian, other than just complexion. Lastly, I'd like to ask that we all come together, those of us from the Divine Nine and those of us who are not considered so divine. I'd like to ask the church community and the not necessarily religious community. I'd like to ask those who consider themselves high sedity and those who feel they're just getting by. I'd like to ask those with businesses and those with nonprofits. I'd like to ask those with several letters behind their names and those who use several letters to describe who they are. I like to ask those who feel that they are just starting to make it and those of y'all who say you're all the big ballers to all come together and let us develop a national-wide community plan to stop our children from falling further behind academically and socially during this pandemic. I do have a few ideas. Look in your basement, closets, and find old books, old school desks, educational games, educational software. Let us use churches, centers, and some homes as academic support centers. Let's work with our local school systems and governments to make sure all our children have more than adequate internet access. Let us create neighborhood teams to check on neighborhood kids to make sure they're doing their work and correctly. Let us create daily, weekly, and monthly online academic activities and competitions to ensure our children stay engaged and motivated. Let us bring in our experts and not so expert persons to use their knowledge, strength, resources, and compassion to make sure our children do not regress during this pandemic, but actually progress. In this plan, we can use our understanding of academics, the economy, workplace, society, and our children to make sure they are being exposed to the skills that they will need to be productive and successful. We can show them how to solve for X squared and how to use a screwdriver. As we reinforce Jamal and Ebony's learning their 1, 2, 3s and ABCs, we can also expose them to Thomas Edison, but also Benjamin Banneker, Garrett Morgan, and also Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, and others. We will talk to them about the importance of work, and we will also talk to them about the importance of creating businesses. To paraphrase the great Ozzie Davis, it ain't the woman or the man, it's the plan. So let us come together so our children will come out of this pandemic significantly above expectations instead of the usual of meeting the subsurface expectations. To conclude my contribution to the Brothers on the Block conversation, I'd like to show my age by concluding with a paraphrase line from a 1970s TV show. Gentlemen, we can rebuild. We have the knowledge, we have the technology. We just need the self-love, dedication, and commitment. The block was pumping tonight. I'd like to thank all the gentlemen for being willing to come out to the block this evening. The conversation was inspiring, interesting, thought-provoking. All my life, all my kids' life, I've always told them to dispel the myth. Gentlemen, tonight, you all dispelled the myth. And thank you so much. You gonna bring them up? As we leave, there are a couple of things I like to say. I like to reiterate something the gentleman said. Please make sure, if you haven't already, please make sure that you complete your census. It's very important. Anthony and I, and then Montel, and a lot of us, we work in areas where government funding is very important in order to create fair housing, in order to create services for seniors, children, low income, and what have you. So the census is very important. And the second thing, of course, is please, please, if you haven't already, make sure that you're prepared to vote in November, because it's very important. I'd like to I would like to ask Pastor Franklin and also Pastor Brian Ennis to let us leave in prayer.
Pastor, you want me to go first? I'll go first.
Right.
Let us look to the Lord. Father, we want to look back on this historical day, Father. There's a lot of knowledge that was going through it. Father, let us pray that we take part in our own Christianity and make sure that we develop this throughout this great country we live in beyond. Let us pray for an understanding, because I am pro-black, that I'm against anybody. Let us pray that we need to carry each other's burdens, Father, because without that, iron would not sharpen iron. Let us pray to dispel the myth that the rule is black men grew up with a two-parent household. Let us display that myth. Let us pray for our youth, Father, and let us get an understanding, because I may be born a stereotype that a parent was on crack, I still can be successful. Let us pray for social, cultural, and conditioning, Father, because we have to trust one another if we're going to grow and succeed in this great country that you have afforded us to live in, Father. Let us pray for education, Father. Pray for our youth, Father, that they may be the bridge to bring the next generation through. Let us pray that education should always be inclusive and not just for one man's story, his story, but all man's story. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Thank God and amen.
Father God, we just thank you once again. We pray that you empower us to change our spending habits. Lord, give us the mindset to economically support our brothers before we support another. Help us, God, now to become users of a benefit of group economics. We pray that true democracy will manifest itself in America and that everyone is truly counted. Then, Lord, help us to filter out the truth from false information, that we, like Simon, can help bear the burdens of our brothers and sisters. Help us, Lord, through conversations by brothers on the block, that we might continue to lift one another higher as we say Ashe and Amen. Brother Will.
Unmute yourself.